What happens when an entire army is paralyzed by fear and only one person chooses to believe? For 40 days, a giant named Goliath walked into the valley and challenged the army of Israel. Morning after morning, evening after evening, no one answered him. King Saul's soldiers stood frozen, not because they lacked weapons, but because they had lost hope. Far from the battlefield, a young shepherd named David was tending his father's sheep, completely unaware that his faith would soon change the course of history. One ordinary morning, Jesse sent his youngest son David to take food to his brothers at the battlefield. David expected to deliver supplies, but instead, he found an army held captive by fear. As Goliath stepped forward once again and shouted his challenge, every soldier around David looked away in silence. But David could not understand what everyone else had accepted. Who is this Philistine, he wondered, that he should defy the armies of the living God? While others saw an unbeatable giant, David saw a challenge that should never have gone unanswered. Word of David's bold questions soon reached King Saul. The young shepherd was brought before the king, who looked at him with doubt. "You are only a young man," Saul said. "How can you fight a warrior who has battled since his youth?" But David answered with quiet confidence. He spoke of the lion and the bear and how God had delivered him every time. Saul offered his royal armor, but David laid it aside. He would not fight as someone else. With only his staff, his sling, and 5 smooth stones, David walked toward the valley, carrying something far greater than weapons. He carried unwavering faith. As David stepped into the valley, the silence was overwhelming. On one side stood the armies of Israel, watching with anxious hearts. On the other stood Goliath, a giant who had terrified a nation for 40 days. When Goliath saw David, he laughed. He saw only a shepherd carrying a staff and a sling. But David saw something entirely different. "You come against me with sword and spear," David declared, "but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty." Then, without hesitation, David placed a smooth stone into his sling. With one faithful step, one steady swing, and one perfectly guided stone, history changed forever. The giant fell, and the valley that had echoed with fear now echoed with victory. As the giant lay defeated, the fear that had gripped Israel for 40 long days disappeared in a single moment. The same people who had stood in silence now lifted their voices in celebration. Hope had returned to the camp. David did not walk into the valley because he believed he was stronger than Goliath. He walked into the valley because he believed God was greater than any giant standing before him. Sometimes, the greatest giants we face are not people standing across a battlefield. They are the fears that whisper, "You are not enough." But the story of David reminds us that faith is not the absence of fear. Faith is choosing to trust God even when the giant is still standing. This has been Scripture Tales, where every story points us back to truth.